Fermin Lopez is one of Barcelona's brightest talents. After seasons of ups and downs so far, he was Barcelona's man of the match in their recent game against Valencia. He showed everything that people always loved about him. Great movements, clinical finishing, quick thinking, accurate passes, confidence. Fermin Lopez truly was his best self against Valencia. But apart from that, he's also been important in a few of other Barcelona's great games, like the one against Bayern Munich for example. Fermin Lopez really is one of Barcelona's most promising players for the future. But there is a problem. For most of the season, he hasn't been one of Hansi Flick's starting 11 players. Players like Dani, Olmo, Pedri and Gavi have often been above him in the pecking order, and compared to last season under Gavi, Fermin Lopez has spent way more time on the bench right now. He might be one hell of a talent, but what good is that if he's not the best or even the second best in his position? Fermin Lopez's situation at Barcelona is interesting to say the least, which is why in this video we'll take a deeper look at exactly how important he can still be for the remainder of the season, and we'll also go deeper into whether he can ever fully settle himself in a starting lineup. So let's just get right to it. So first of all, we have to know exactly how good Fermin Lopez is. Because in some games, like against Valencia, he's literally the best man on the pitch, whereas in other games he's just quite unconvincing and doesn't have too much of an impact. Some players are consistent and will almost always deliver. Think about Pedri, Marc or Lamine Yamal this season. But Fermin Lopez up till now hasn't been consistent whatsoever. He's mixed up great games with mediocre performances. So again, how good is Fermin Lopez actually, and how consistent can he be at his best level? Well, a lot probably depends on the opponents that Barcelona are facing. Just think about Fermin's two best games so far this season. Those are probably the ones against Valencia recently and the one against Bayern Munich. Against Valencia, he scored twice, gave 2 assists, and in general he was involved in most attacks, he recovered a lot of balls, he was a threat all game long, just an all-out MVP performance. Against Bayern Munich, he gave 2 assists in a game where Barcelona scored 4 goals in total. Again, he was very hard for the defense to contain, his movement was dangerous, he was giving it his all, it was a classic Fermin Lopez performance. But there must be a reason why those 2 games specifically were his best 2 games. Valencia and Bayern Munich both played with a high line, leaving a lot of room for Barcelona to use in attack, and that is probably the perfect kind of opponent for Fermin Lopez to play against. He simply has a better chance of showing his qualities against opponents that allow Barcelona a lot of space. Deep runs, quick combinations, long passes, it's all easier when there is more room to use. If Barcelona play against a low block, there's less runs to make, not as much shooting opportunities, playing through balls is way harder, and that makes it harder for Fermin to shine against those kind of opponents. That's maybe why he wasn't that convincing in some games this season. And for some players, it doesn't matter whether the opponent plays with a high line or not. Marc will always maintain that balance in midfield. Lamine Yamal will always be a threat because of his 1v1 dribbles and his sheer individual brilliance. Pedri's vision is so good that it doesn't matter if the opponent plays with a low block, because even then he will still find a solution. But for Fermin Lopez, the opponent does seem to make a difference, and against low block teams, his qualities just don't really come to fruition. So the form that he's in doesn't matter. If Barcelona were to play against a super defensive team right now, there is just no way that we're going to see Fermin put in that same performance that he put in against Valencia. So to come back to the question, how good exactly is Fermin Lopez? Well, it probably depends on the opponent. Fermin's qualities are most useful when there's a lot of space, which is why we've always seen him put in his best performances when Barcelona have acres of space to use. But what does that mean for his place in Hansi Flick's pecking order? How does he compare to his 2 biggest concurrents, Dani Olmo and Gavi? Well, Dani Olmo might be technically a little better than Fermin Lopez. He's more two-footed, he's better in small spaces, he's more clinical in front of goal, and he's probably better at dribbling. So against teams that don't leave a lot of space, he will still be able to create a lot of danger even in those tight spaces. Think about this goal against Rayo Vallecano early in the season. Dani Olmo didn't have a lot of space here, but he was just so sharp on the ball, every touch was perfect, and very few players have the same technical quality that he has in these kind of situations. Same goes for some of his other goals so far. Dani Olmo's technical brilliance in the attacking third is really unmatched. So against teams that defend deeply, if you have to make the choice between Fermin Lopez and Dani Olmo, your best bet is probably Dani Olmo because he's better at maneuvering in those tight spaces. But Fermin Lopez does have some things that Dani Olmo doesn't have. He's defensively more aggressive, and his quick thinking is even more impressive than that of Dani Olmo. I mean, one of the most typical things about Fermin is how he can see and exploit openings more quickly than others. So if you know that you're going to get a lot of space, then you might want to choose Fermin above Dani Olmo. Dani Olmo is a better pick against defensive teams, but Fermin is absolutely deadly and arguably a better pick than Dani Olmo against offensive teams. But what about Gavi? How does Fermin compare to him? Well, Gavi is a totally different kind of player than Dani Olmo. At first, many people didn't know how Hansi Flick was going to use him, and Hansi Flick himself first struggled to find the right role for him, but in January it has become clear that Gavi can be huge for Barcelona when he's playing as that attacking midfielder. He wins back balls constantly high up the pitch, he's involved in every attack, he barely makes any wrong decisions, he's accurate with everything. It's like you're watching an attacking version of N'Golo Kanté. Compared to Fermin and Dani, Gavi's not as brilliant in the final third and his shooting isn't as good, so if you want to score goals and have a threat in attack, then Dani or Fermin are probably your best bets. But if you want to have control over the midfield and you want to dominate the game, then Gavi can give you something that those other two can't. He's better defensively, more composed, more press resistance, but despite that, he still does pose somewhat of an attacking threat. Against Real Madrid in the Supercopa, for example, Gavi's all-around presence in midfield and attack was crucial to help Barcelona dominate the game. So that takes us to an important question. Where does Fermin Lopez rank in this attacking midfield pecking order of Hansi Flick, and how much game time will he have for the second half of the season? Hansi Flick basically has 3 world-class players that are all at their best in that position. And if no one is injured, who would you pick then? It probably just depends on the opponent. Gavi might be ideal for big games because of his mentality, his composure, and his impact on a game. Dani is undoubtedly the best choice against low block teams, and Fermin is probably ideal against attacking teams that leave a lot of space in behind the defense. The funny thing is that Fermin feels like somewhat of a combination between Gavi and Dani. He's got the shooting and finishing that are comparable to Dani and the defensive work ethic that you associate with Gavi. He's a hybrid. And also, don't forget that the season is long, so everyone needs to get enough rest. Injuries will probably still happen, so eventually all 3 of these players will probably still get a good amount of game time. I mean, I haven't even mentioned Pablo Torre whatsoever this far, but even he will probably still get a decent amount of minutes just because the match schedule is that busy. So more concretely, if you look at the schedule for Barcelona's following games against Atalanta, either Fermin or Gavi could be a good pick. Fermin because Atalanta play quite offensively and open, Gavi because you might need a player who can help you control the possession against a team like Atalanta. So maybe Gavi is the best choice here. Against Alaves, you could go with Dani as they're probably going to play quite defensively, that is, if he's back from injury by then. Against Valencia in the Copa del Rey, I think it's obvious who Hansi Flick should pick there. And at the end of the day, all 3 of these players are world class and it's just a matter of balancing out the minutes so that everyone gets enough of them. But purely looking from Fermin's perspective, it is kind of a shame that we'll probably never see him become the first choice attacking midfielder this season. He's got the talent, but there's just so much depth in that role that he cannot always show it. Last season really was his breakthrough season, and even though he's had good moments this season as well, he's been overshadowed by other players like Dani and Gavi that's shown in his position. So that brings us to one last important question. How much of a future does Fermin Lopez actually have at Barcelona? Because now we have only talked about Fermin, Dani and Gavi, but there's way more potential and talent waiting to shine in that attacking midfielder role. There's Pablo Torre, who's been promising whenever he's gotten a chance. There's Toni Fernandes, there's Guille Fernandes, Unai Hernandez, Noah Darvig, Quim Junyent. I mean, this is La Masia's most crowded position. So even if Gavi and Dani get out injured for the season and Fermin gets the opportunity of a lifetime to prove himself, there will still be other options out there in case that he doesn't make his mark. Contrary to players like Lamine Yamal, Alejandro Balde or Pau Cubarsí, Fermin Lopez is probably more replaceable, simply because Barcelona have tons of talent in that attacking midfielder position. So the rest of this season and next season are probably huge for Fermin's future at Barcelona. If he can actually manage to get a good amount of game time, he might eventually become a starting 11 player. But if he can't make his mark now, and if Gavi and Dani get way more game time than him, and if it stays that way for a few more years, then I wouldn't be surprised to see him leave Barcelona at some point. Fermin might have the potential to become one of the best midfielders in the world. And even though he loves Barcelona, if he cannot fully blossom into his full potential up here, then he might leave one day. So that is why I really hope that he can play an important role for the rest of the season. He might not have been Hansi Flick's main option in attacking midfield thus far, but he's been a useful rotational player, and in some games we've seen glimpses of his true potential. But for all we know, Dani gets out injured for the season at some point, and with Gavi needing enough rests, a chance like that could turn the tide for Fermin Lopez. It's simply hard to try and predict how the coming months and years will look for him. He is a very talented player, and I think everyone wants to see him grow into a cornerstone player in Barcelona's new era, but the matter of fact is that at this point we don't really know whether he can actually get there. That's the sad truth about Fermin Lopez. He probably has the potential to become a Barcelona legend, it's just a matter of waiting to see whether he can eventually have the same kind of impact that others like Lamine Yamal, Pau Cubarsí, Pedri and Marc Casado have already managed to have this season. So that was it for today's video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and feel free to share your own opinion in the comments down below. And of course, Força Barça, Força Fermin Lopez, and have a good day.